Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Anggita Prameswari. Today, I want a presentation about hair semantic pragmatic, and my name is 330106. The first is define and contrast lexical semantics versus compositional semantics with example. Lexical semantics studies the meaning of individual words and how they are organized in the mental lexicon. It focuses on encode, meaning, and sense relations such as synonym, antonym, and hyponym. Word meaning can be analyzed through semantic features. An example, bachelor can be described as human, adult, male, and married. This shows that lexical meaning is stored in the language system independently of context. In contrast, compositional semantics studies how word meanings combine according to syntactic structure to form sentence meaning. It is based on principle of compositionality, which states that sentence meaning depends on the meanings of its parts and their structural arrangement. An example is the dog catches the cat and the cat catches the dog. Although the words are identical, the different syntactic structure change the semantic and agent and them, resulting in different proportional meanings. In semantic pragmatics, both lexical and compositional semantics explain literal meaning. However, pragmatic interpretation may extend beyond this. An example, it is called hair. Semantically, it describes temperature. In pragmatically, it may function as an indirect request. Thus, lexical semantics explain word meaning, compositional semantics explains sentence meaning, and pragmatics explains speaker meanings. Next is discuss synonym, antonym. Number two, discuss synonym, antonym, hyponym, and their roles in lexical semantics. In lexical semantics, sense relation explain how words are systematically organized in a mental lexicon. Three important relations are synonym, antonym, and hyponym. If synonym refers to similarity of meaning between two lexical items. However, absolute synonym is rare because words often differ in register, connotation, and collocation. An example is big and large are similar in meaning. However, we say a big mistake but not a large mistake. This shows that synonym is usually partial rather than complete. Antonym refers to oppositeness of meaning. It is can involve readable opposition, hot cold, complementary opposition, alive dead, or relational opposites, buy and sell. Antonym shows that meaning is often defined through contrast. An example, John is alive logically excludes John is dead. This, de- this demonstrates complementary antonym. And hyponym refers to hierarchical meaning relation in which one word's meaning is included within another. Example, a rose is a flower. Rose is a hyponym of flower, and flower is the hypernym. In semantic pragmatics, this relation describes encode semantic structure. However, contextual interpretation may influence how such words are understood and discouraged. And number three is explain semantic roles, agent, experiencer, them, and their syntactic relevance. Semantic roles refer to the roles that participants play in the situation described by a sentence. They describe the relationship between the predicate and its arguments at the level of meaning. Common semantic roles include agent, them, and experiencer, goal, and instrument. Semantic roles belong to the level of semantic structure, not purely syntactic structure. However, they are closely connected to syntax because syntactic position often reflects semantic roles. Example: Sarah opened the door. In this sentence, Sarah functions as the agent because she performs the action, and the door functions as them because it affected by the action. If we change the structure, the door was opened by Sarah. The syntactic subject changed, but the semantic roles remain the same. Sarah is still the agent, and the door is still the theme. This shows that semantic roles are independent or surface word order, but syntax determines how they are grammatically expressed. In semantic pragmatics, semantic roles contribute to propositional meaning. They help determine who did what to whom, which form the semantic basis of interpretation. However, pragmatic factors may influence how participants are interpreted in this course, such as focus, emphasis, and implied agents. Number 4 is describe entertainment versus presupposition with examples in sentence analysis. Entailment is a semantic relation in which the truth of one sentence logically guarantees the truth of another. If sentence A is true, sentence B must also be true. However, if A is negated, the entailment usually disappears. Example: John killed the snake. This entails the snake died. If we say John did not kill the snake, we can no longer conclude that the snake died. This shows that entailment depends on the truth of the original proposition. In contrast, preposition refers to background assumptions that are taken for granted by the speaker. Example: John stopped smoking. This presupposes John used to smoke. Even if we say John did not stop smoking, the assumption that John used to smoke remains. In semantic pragmatics, entailment concerns logical truth conditions at the semantic level, while presupposition operates at the interface of semantics and pragmatics because it depends on shared background knowledge in this course. And number 5 is explain polysemy and homonym and how they contribute to ambiguity. Polysemy and homonym both involve a single linguistic form with more than one meaning, but they differ in the relationship between those meanings. Polysemy refers to a single word that has multiple related meanings. An example: the word head can mean the part of the body, the leader of an organization, or the top part of an object. These meanings are conceptually related because they all involve the idea of top or control. And in contrast, homonym refers to a single form that has two completely unrelated meanings. The meanings do not share a semantic connection. An example is the word bank can mean a financial institution on the side of a river. These meanings are historically and conceptually unrelated. Both polysemy and homonym contribute to lexical ambiguity, where a sentence can have more than one interpretation. An example: she went to the bank. Without context, the sentence is ambiguous. In semantic pragmatics, the semantic system explains that multiple meanings exist in the lexicon, but pragmatics context determines which meaning is intended in actual communication. Next is number 6. Discuss prototype theory in semantics and compare it with classical categorization. Prototype theory is a cognitive approach to categorization in semantics. primarily associated with Eleanor Roch. It argues that categories are not defined by fixed, necessary, and sufficient features, but by degrees of typicality. Some members of a category are more central or prototypical than others. According to this theory, a category membership is gradient rather than absolute. An example, in the category bird, a robin or sparrow is considered more prototypical than a penguin or ostrich. Although penguins are biologically birds, they are less typical because they do not fly and differ from the common mental image of bird. Prototype theory challenged the classical view of categorization, which assumes that categories are defined by strict defining features. Example of classical categorization: a bachelor is defined as human, adult, male, and married. This approach treats category membership as fixed and rule-based. In semantic pragmatics, prototype theory explains how lexical meaning is cognitively structured and how categorization may influence interpretation in discourse. Context can shift, which features become relevant, showing that meaning is not purely rigid but cognitively flexible. Next is number 7. Analyze the principle of compositionality and its application in meaning construction. The principle of compositionality states that the meaning of a sentence is determined by the meanings of its individual parts, and the way those parts are syntactically combined. This principle, often associated with French, forms the foundation of formal semantics. According to this view, sentence meaning is not random or holistic, it is systematically constructed from lexical meaning and grammatical structure. Example, dog bite man and man bite dogs. Both sentences contain the same lexical items, but their meanings differ because the syntactic structure assigns different semantic roles. This shows that meaning depends not only on word meaning, but also on structural configuration. And the principle also explains how complex sentences are interpreted. Example, every student passed the exam. The meaning depends on how quantification is structurally interpreted. Compositional semantics determines the logical form that represents the propositions. In semantic pragmatics, the principle of compositionality explains how literal propositional meaning is constructed. However, pragmatic process, such as implicator or contextual enrichment, may extend or modify this literal meaning in actual communication. The next is number 8. Describe how semantic fields and lexical set function in language. Semantic field refers to a group of words that are related in meaning because they belong to the same conceptual domain. For example, the semantic field of color includes words such as red, blue, green, and yellow. These words are semantically related because they describe different values within the same conceptual category. A lexical set, on the other hand, is a group of words that belong to the same system or classification within a language. Lexical sets often reflect hierarchical or culturally structured categories. For example, in the domain of kinship terms, words such as a mother, father, sister, and brother form a lexical set. These terms are systematically organized within the language and reflect social and cultural distinction. The next is define the axis and describe its type: person, spatial, and temporal. The axis refers to linguistic expression whose interpretation depends on the context of utterance. Dictic expression cannot be fully understood without knowing who is speaking. When the, ut- when the utterance is produced and where it takes place, therefore the axis lies at the interface of semantic and pragmatics. There are several main types of axis. The first is person axis. It refers to expression that indicate participant in the speech event such as I, you, we, he, and they. Example, I am tired. The reference of I depends on who is speaking. And the next is spatial or place. The axis refers to expression that indicate location relative to the speaker, such as here, there, this, and that. An example is put the book here. The meaning of here depends on the speaker's location. And the next is temporal. The axis refers to expression related to time, such as now, then, today, and tomorrow. Example, I will call you tomorrow. The interpretation of tomorrow depends on the time of speaking. Other types include discourse axis, which refers to part of the discourse itself. This is what I mean, and social axis, which reflects social relationship, honorifics or formal pronouns. The next is discuss Prince's cooperative principle and its maxim with example of flouting. And the next is discuss Greece cooperative principle and its maxim with example of flouting. Greece cooperative principle explains how interlocutors normally cooperate in conversation to achieve effective communication. It proposes that speakers generally make their contributions appropriate to the conversational context and purpose. The principle is supported by four maxims. The first is the maxim of quantity. It is requires speakers to provide as much information as needed, but not more than necessary. And the next is the maxim of quality. Requires speakers to be truthful and not say what they believe to be false. And the next is the maxim of relation, requires relevance. The next is the maxim of manner, requires clarity, avoiding ambiguity and obscurity. An example, did you finish the assignment? I started it. B does not directly answer yes or no, apparently giving less information than required. By floating the maximum quantity, B generates a conversational implicator that the assignment is not finished, but the B is start to finish the assignment. In semantic pragmatics, the cooperative principle explains how pragmatic meanings arises. From interaction between literal meaning and conversational expectation, the semantic content provides the best meaning, but implicators emerge when listeners assume that speakers are being cooperative and interpret deviation from the maxim accordingly. And number 11. Explain conversational implicator versus conventional implicator. Implicator refers to meaning that is implied rather than explicitly stated. In pragmatic theory, especially following Breeze, implicators are divided into conversational and conventional types. Conversational implicator arises from context and the assumption that speakers follow the cooperative principle. It is not part of the literal semantic meaning, but is inferred by the hearer. A key property of conversational implicator is that it is cancelable, meaning it can be denied without contradiction. In example, some students pass the exam. Semantically, some means at least one. Pragmatically, it often implies not all. However, this implication can be cancelled. Some students passed the exam. In fact, all of them did. This shows that the implicator is context-based, not part of encoded meaning. In contrast, conventional implicator is attached to specific lexical items and is part of their conventional meaning. It doesn't depend on conversational reasoning in the same way and is not easily cancelable. Example, she is poor but honest. The word that conveys a sense of contrast between being poor and being honest. This contrast, it is not part of the truth condition, but is conventionally encoded in the word. But the next describes speech act theory and identify types of speech acts with example. Speech act theory explains that when people speak, they are not only producing sentences but also performing actions. This theory was developed by J. L. Austin and later expanded by John Searle. It emphasized that language functions as a form of action and communication. Austin distinguished three levels of speech acts. The locutionary act is the act of producing a meaningful utterance. The illocutionary act is intended function of the utterance, such as requesting, promising, and apologizing. The perlocutionary act is the effect the utterance has on the hearer. An example is, I apologize for being late. Illocutionary act is the statement itself, and the illocutionary act is apologizing. And the perlocutionary act, it may be that the hearer forgives the speaker. Searle further classified speech acts into five main types: representat- representatives, directives, commissives, expressives, and declaratives. Example, please close the door. This is directive. I promise to help you. It is commissive. The next is analyze how presupposition operates in pragmatic interpretation. Analyze how preposition operates in pragmatic interpretation. Preposition is background information that the speaker assumes to be true when making an utterance. It is not the main asserted meaning, but information treated as already accepted in discourse. A key property of presupposition is that it typically survives negation. Example, John stopped smoking. This is presuppose that John used to smoke. Even we say John did not stop smoking, the assumption that he smoked before still remains. And the next is discuss the importance of context in pragmatic meaning. Context is essential in pragmatics because meaning is not determined solely by linguistic form, but by how utterances are interpreted in specific situations. Pragmatic meaning depends on factors such as speaker intention, social knowledge, physical setting, and social relationship between interlocutors. An example is late. Semantically, this sentence states as a fact about time. Pragmatically, it may function as a suggestion to leave, a reminder to go to bed, or even warning depending on the situation. Context also helps interpret the existing implicator and speech act. Without contextual information, expressions like I, here, or tomorrow cannot be properly understood. Similarly, confessional implicator arise because hearers interpret utterance based on assumption about cooperative communication. The next is number 15. Explain relevance theory and its role in communication and interpretation. Relevance theory developed by Dan Sperber and Der Wilson is a pragmatic theory that explains how heroes interpret utterance based on the search for relevance. The theory proposed that human communication is guided by the expectation that every utterance is optimally relevant. According to relevance theory, an utterance is relevant if it produces sufficient cognitive effects, such as a new information or strengthened assumption with minimal processing effort. An example, are you coming to the party? I have an exam tomorrow. Semantically, B states a fact about an exam. Grammatically, the hero infers that B will not attend the party. This inference is made because it is the most relevant interpretation in the context. In semantic pragmatics, relevance theory explains how interpretation goes beyond literal meaning. It accounts for implicator, contextual arrangement, and inferential process in communication. Meaning is not fully encoded in language, but constructed through interaction with linguistic input and contextual assumption. And the next is case study. Number one, a headline reads, Miners refuse to work after death, and identify and explain ambiguity. There are two possible interpretations. The first, interpretation 1, intended meaning. The miner refused to work after someone dies, after a co-worker dies, co-worker dies. Here, after death, modifies the verb phrase refuse to work, expressing time or cause. The next is interpretation 2, unintended meaning. The miners are dead and refuse to work. In this reading, after that seems to modify miners. The ambiguity arises because prepositional phrase in English can attack two different constituents. Semantically, both readings are structurally possible. Pragmatically, work knowledge eliminates the second interpretation. This case shows how syntax affects semantic interpretation and how pragmatic inference resolves ambiguity. Next is the sentence, the bank is full, confuses a learner. Analyze its lexical ambiguity. This sentence shows lexical ambiguity, specifically homonym. The word bank has two unrelated meanings stored in the mental lexicon. Meaning 1, a financial institution. Meaning 2, the side of a river. Because the sentence gives no context, both meanings are semantically possible. Interpretation 1, if a bank refers to a financial institution, the sentence means the building is crowded with people. Interpretation 2, if bank refers to a river bank, it could mean the river bank is full, for example, full of water, of people. Semantically, the ambiguity exists. At a word level, pragmatically, context determines the intended meaning. This case illustrates how lexical ambiguity is resolved through contextual inference. The next is analyze the metaphor time is money using cognitive semantic principles. The metaphor time is money can be explained using cognitive semantics, especially conceptual metaphor theory, like of injunction. In this theory, abstract concepts are understood through more concrete domains. Here, the first is target domain, is time, abstract concept. The second is source domain, money, constraint economic resource. The metaphor maps properties of money onto time. Money is valuable, limited, can be spent, saved, wasted, or invested. These same concepts are applied to time. Example implication. I spent 2 hours on that. Semantically, the sentence is not literal. Pragmatically and cognitively, speakers interpret it through conceptual mapping. It shows how meaning is shaped by mental conceptual structure, not just dictionary definitions. Next is student confuse table as only a noun. Discuss polysemy and semantic processing. This case relates to polysemy where one word has multiple related meanings. The word table is not only a noun, piece of furniture, but can also function as a verb. As a noun, table means at a flat surface with legs. As a verb, especially in a formal or parliamentary context, to table something means to uh, present or postpone a proposal. These meanings are related because both involve the idea of placing something on a surface, literal or abstract. The student's confusion shows a limitation in semantic processing where only one meaning is activated in the mental lexicon. In reality, language users rely on contextual cues to select the appropriate meaning. This case demonstrates how polysemous words require flexible interpretation based on context and grammatical function. The next is dogs bark, cats meow, fish analyze using semantic features. This case can be analyzed using semantic features theory. Words are understood through sets of meaning components of features. For example, dog is animal, animal is mammal, mammal is canine, canine is barks. Cat, cat is animal, mammal, feline, and meows. The verbs bark and meow are semantically linked to animals that have the feature is produce audible vocal sound. Fish, however, typically lack the feature audible vocalization in everyday semantic knowledge. Therefore, the sentence creates a gap because fish do not conventionally have a verb associated with sound production. The humor of confusion arises because the pattern expects parallel structure, animal and typical sound, but fish don't fit the same semantic feature pattern. This case shows how meaning is structured through semantic features and how expectations are based on shared lexical knowledge. The next is define bachelor using componential analysis. What are the issues? Using componential analysis, the meaning of bachelor can be broken down into semantic features. Bachelor is human, human is adult, adult and male, male is married. This method attempts to define meaning through necessary and sufficient features. However, there are problems. The definition doesn't fully account for real-life usage. For example, is it a proper bachelor? He is a male. Male is an adult, but the term is not normally used for him. What about divorced men? What about long-term unmarried partners? These cases show that meaning is influenced not only by semantic features, but also by social convention and pragmatic context. The next is an ad says our shop leaves nothing behind. Analyze it. Semantic entertainment. Semantically leaves not behind. It entails that no residue remains after using the soap. If the sentence is true, then it logically follows that the soap doesn't leave dirt, stains, or foam on the surface. However, the phrase is also somewhat vague. Nothing is an absolute term, but in real world use, it a function hyperbolic advertising language rather than a strict logical claim. From a semantic perspective, the entanglement would be if the soap leaves nothing behind, there is no remaining substance after washing. From a pragmatic perspective, consumer interpret this as meaning the soap cleans completely and leaves surface fresh. This case shows how entailment operates at the semantic level, while pragmatic inference shapes how the message is understood in advertising context. The car is a lemon. Explain the figurative meaning and its interpretation. This sentence illustrates figurative meaning, specifically metaphor, in lexical semantics. Literally, a lemon is a type of fruit. However, in informal English, lemon has a figurative meaning, a defective or low quality product, especially a car. Semantically, this is a case of polysemy or extended meaning, where the negative qualities associated with lemons, sour, unpleasant, are mapped onto the product. Pragmatically, listeners use contextual knowledge and cultural conventions to interpret the intended meaning. No one interprets the sentence literally as the car being a fruit. Instead, they infer that the car is faulty or unreliable. This case demonstrates how figurative meaning depends on shared conceptual knowledge and pragmatic inference beyond literal semantics. The next is a student says, "Could you open the window?" As a polite request, analyze speech act. This sentence illustrates speech act theory and Austin and Searle. Grammatically, it is an interrogative sentence asking about ability. Semantically, it questions whether the hearer is capable of opening the window. However, pragmatically, it functions as a request, not a real question about ability. This shows the difference between a locutionary act, illocutionary act, prolocutionary act. Locutionary act, the literal question about ability. Illocutionary act, the intended request to open the window. Prolocutionary act, the effect, the hearer opens the window. This is an example of an indirect speech act because the grammatical form is a question differs from the communicative function is a request. Next is number 10. A politician says we will bring change. Discuss pragmatic vagueness and inference. The statement "we will bring change" illustrates pragmatic vagueness. The word change is semantically broad and lacks specific preference. It doesn't specify what kind of change, in which area, or how it will be implemented. Semantically, change simply means becoming different. However, the lack of detail makes the statement open to multiple interpretations. Pragmatically, listeners rely on inference and background knowledge, political context, campaign promises, ideology, to interpret what kind of change is implied. Different audiences may infer different meanings based on their expectation. This case shows how vagueness can be strategically used in discourse, allowing flexibility while avoiding precise commitments. Meaning here is shaped more by pragmatic interpretation than by strict semantic content. 11. A person says it's getting late, implying the conversation should end and analyze implicator. This sentence illustrates conversational implicators. Semantically, "is getting late" is a simple statement about time. It describes a change in the time of day. However, pragmatically, in certain contexts during a long visit, the speaker may imply that the conversation should end or there is a time to leave. The implied meaning is not stated directly. directly be inferred by the hearer. This happens because of the cooperative principle, especially the maximum relation. The listener assumes that the statement is relevant to the situation and search for a meaningful implication. Thus, the first literal meaning, the time is becoming late. The second implicator, we should end this conversation. This case shows how meaning often goes beyond semantics and depends on pragmatic inference. The 12 is after spilling coffee. A friend says, "Nice job." Analyze irony and indirectness. This example illustrates irony and indirect speech in pragmatics. Semantically, "nice job" expresses praise. It has positive literal meaning. However, in this context, after spilling coffee, the intended meaning is the opposite. The speaker actually implies criticism. This is verbal irony, where the literal meaning contrasts with the intended meaning. The interpretation relies on contextual knowledge. The hearer recognizes that spoiling coffee is a mistake, so genuine praise would be inappropriate. Therefore, the hearer infers the ironic meaning. This case is demonstrate how pragmatic meaning can override semantic meaning, and how irony depends on shared background knowledge and contextual cues. 13. Do you take this woman? Discuss performative speech act. In institutional context, this sentence illustrates a performative speech act in an institutional setting. According to speech act theory from Austin, certain utterances do not merely describe an action but perform it. In this case, when the participant responds, "I do," the act of marriage is being legally and socially performed. The effectiveness of the speech act depends on felicity conditions. It must occur in the proper institutional context. It must be performed by authorized individuals. Participants must have the appropriate intention. Semantically, the sentence is questioned. Pragmatically and institutionally, it functions as a part of a ritual that creates a new social reality, marriage. This case shows how meaning is shaped not only by language structure, but also by social convention and institutional authority. 14. A teacher says you should try harder. Analyze politeness and face threatening act. This sentence can be analyzed using politeness theory from Brown and Levinson. Semantically, it is a directive suggesting improvement. Pragmatically, it functions as criticism. The utterance threatens the hearer's positive face, the desire to be appreciated and approved of. It implies that the hearer's current effort is insufficient. Therefore, is a face-threatening act or FTA. If the teacher says it directly is about on-record strategy, if softened, maybe you could try a bit harder next time. It becomes a positive or negative politeness strategy, reducing the threat. This case shows how evaluation criticism involves pragmatic considerations of social relationships and face management. And the last is, how was your date? Well, he showed up. Analyze scalar implicator. This exchange illustrates scalar implicator. The first is literal meaning, "he showed up," simply states attendance. The second is implicator. By choosing this minimal statement instead of stronger alternative, "it was great, it was fun," the speaker implies that the date was not impressive. Example: a scale of evaluation: excellent, good, Okay, but choosing the weakest positive statement signal that nothing stronger applies. And analyzes the hearer inverse negative evaluation based on what was not said, showing how pragmatic reasoning and conversational maxims generate implied meaning beyond literal semantics. So this is my presentation about higher semantic pragmatics. Number 1 to 30. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.